Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. And I should say, welcome back to season 5 of the Better Events Podcast. We are so thrilled to be here with you for our 5th season. And in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about lessons learned in events and business in 2024. This is an annual episode that Mary and I love to do so that you can learn from our mistakes and our lessons learned. And hopefully that sets you up to have a little bit smoother of a business or an event process in the new year. So give it a listen.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join 2 event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Better Events Podcast. We are seriously thrilled to be with you today because it is season 5 of the podcast. I don't know if you can believe it. I can't believe it, but we are going to rock and roll and get into this season of the podcast. And we're kicking that off with this week's episode about lessons learned in events and business in 2024. So we're going to do a little bit of a recap. But before we get into that, we have our conversation starter for today and for the new year for season 5. No pressure, Logan. But what song do you want to represent your 2025 year?
Mary coming in with a hard-hitting conversation starter for this year. I think the song that I want to represent my year is going to be from our Better Events Conference playlist, courtesy of DJ Heat. Going to do a little shout out. She's our official conference DJ. And she reminded me of a good tune by the Bruno Mars called Finesse, because my goal this year is to refine, and we'll talk more about in our goal setting episode, but I really want to, I feel like finessing, and it's got a good jive to it, is just a really good like anthem of the year. And now I'm gonna have to make sure I add it to my playlist that I listen to every day. Mary, what about you?
That's a good song. I forgot about that one. Mine, I had to get some help from the internet on this one. But mine, my phrase, I guess, is to do less, but to do it well. And that's from a book that Logan and I and others recently read. But so a song that goes with that, maybe is Let It Be by the Beatles, right? Kinda. I can kind of see it. So I like that one. That's a good song. And then also this one actually popped in my head. I don't know. It's called Relax. And I don't remember who it's by, Logan. Do you know? But it's the one that's like, relax, get to it. Yeah, that one.
I like that. I feel like that could just be a regular anthem for any event professional to have. Relax, and or one we could send to clients when they get into their pre-event frenzy.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, listeners, why we want to talk about this topic. We're back. We do this kind of episode every single year where we reflect on lessons learned. We invite you to reflect on any lessons that you learned too. And I think for me, why I love this episode so much is that so much of what we do in the event industry is things you have to learn the hard way. And often we would love to help you avoid you having to learn it the hard way by learning it through us. Because if that is something that the impact we can leave on the industry is making it a little bit smoother for other folks, that to me is a positive endeavor. So get ready to learn from some of our experiences. I think, Mary, some of my lessons, they're a little niche, but I'm excited. I think there's still going to be a nugget in there for the listeners.
Absolutely. There's going to be somebody out there, Logan, it's just going to hit. So we'll listen for that for sure. But before we get into the episode, we just want to call out from the Better Events Conference that you can purchase the recordings from our virtual day, which was day 2 of our 2-day conference, by visiting bettereventspod.com/conference. Most of the sessions were recorded, so there is lots of valuable content that you can still access if you missed out. So feel free to go to bettereventspod.com/conference if you'd like to purchase those recordings. And with that, we're going to get into the lessons learned. So like Logan said, I too am excited about this episode. I have a problem with learning lessons. I think, you know what? I don't want to like tease it too much because I don't actually remember, but I think one of my goals or lessons learned from last year was to actually learn lessons. Like it's an ironic little loop there. But we'll see if we did. I don't really know.
The breaking news, did Mary learn a lesson?
Is that the lesson learned? But yeah, definitely lots of different lessons learned this year. And so we've done this episode before, like Logan said. And so I started compiling some notes throughout the year because it's hard to reflect sometimes. And so I started to write them down. And I have to say, I'm going to kick us off with my first lesson learned, and it's a good one. Okay, so my first lesson learned from 2024 was to cry after events. That was this one. Yeah, it was my first one I wrote down. How sad is that?
Mary.
I know. I wish I had written down like when I wrote it down or the context. There's no context. So, but then I did right after it roller coaster. So events are a roller coaster. But I think perhaps if I recall, the lesson learned is actually like, sometimes we got to get it out and that's okay. And then you move on. So that was apparently one of my lessons learned from 2024.
You know how I feel about crying. I've written a blog post about how I think crying actually shows you care. I know it's controversial to say, do you cry in front of people at work? But I just think you're expressing, it's like a release, right, listeners? Whatever your release is after an event, or as I have tried to do with my longer events, massages, or, recharge. I like it, Mary. It's a good lesson learned. My first lesson learned is a business related one from 2024 is only I know the events that are the right fit, that's in bold, for me, and I need to trust my gut. So this is something that I think I've continued to grapple with, and I think I've talked about it here of just, I feel like I haven't figured out what my perfect cadence or year is just quite yet. And often, like you guys listeners, like you turn to other people for advice. And I've had a little bit of an adverse reaction to people being like, oh, I hate your schedule, or I wouldn't want to do that. And that's been like a gut check for me of like, should I want to? And last year really taught me that like only I'm going to know the events that are the right fit for me. This also goes back to that abundance mindset of there's plenty of events for everyone. And so trying to get away from, oh, I'm available, I have to say yes, and more into let me like find out more details and figure out, does this align with like kind of events I want to do? And really just trusting my gut feeling. I had a couple moments in 2024 where I did trust my gut and others where I didn't. And I think both ways I was like, ooh, when I didn't trust my gut, I was like, I knew it. I heard you gut and I ignored you. And so that's something with 2024, 2025, I'm trying to trust my gut even more.
I think that's amazing. I think that's actually a good reminder for everyone. Sometimes I'm like, is my gut too crazy though? Like, should I trust it? But I think you know yourself best, and that makes a lot of sense. So I love that. My next lesson learned from 2024. So this is a hard lesson learned. So this is a call out to listen up so you don't make my same mistake. I might have shared this in a previous podcast episode, but I lost a potential client in 2024. It was the first time it's happened to me because specifically I took too long to respond to an email. And so that one hurt. That one hurt bad because I did it to myself. And I can't remember like why I took a long time to respond. Was I super busy? I might have, I kind of think it might have been mixed with like I was out of office, but like didn't communicate that. So like first of all, I didn't communicate expectations very well. And then on top of that, it just looked like I took a long time to respond. And I probably did take a long time to respond. So I don't really remember exactly what happened, but it was some mix of stuff like that where I was like, I didn't communicate well on any level, not only because I didn't respond fast enough, but because I didn't set expectations about when I could respond. And so I did lose that client. They were super, super graceful about it. I should say potential client, right? So we were going through the proposal process and they decided to go somebody else because of that. But yeah, like I said, they were graceful about it and I learned a really hard lesson. So now my goal is to respond super quick when I'm communicating with potential clients.
Yeah, that's so tough, Mary, especially when when you lose something because you can't control it. And that's something that you're like,
Yeah.
feel like I can sense you being like, I could have done it earlier.
Could have. Yep, that one's on me, so I gotta own it. Calling all event professionals. Meet Event Pro Suite, the ultimate time saver for your busy schedule. This powerful system combines all the essential tools you need into one streamlined platform, cutting costs and slashing setup time, which really is so true. We were able to do a demo of Event Pro Suite, and one of the things that I loved is the opportunity to collaborate with teams. And so this is really wonderful if you're working with contractors or you have internal team members. You can bring them all into this one inclusive system, and you can also work through different pipelines of revenue. So if you have a pipeline that is just event planning or you do something else for revenue, you can divide up your projects in that way as well.
Yeah, I loved that, and Mary, but I also, from a marketing background, thought it was super cool that it also included a full suite of marketing tools, from how to post on social media to your email management, photo management, which is cool, like you mentioned, for teams, as well as website updates and hosting. So if you are ready to elevate your game, well, try Event Pro Suite today and watch your efficiency and creativity skyrocket. Visit eventprosuite.com to learn more. Let them know that the Better Events podcast sent you. My next one is to create financial projections for when money is coming in, not just when you're invoicing. And this is, if you're a financial person, you might be like, Logan, this is so stupid. You should obviously have been doing this from the jump. But I feel like as a small business owner, a freelancer, I am always very cognizant of when I need to invoice people, when I need to tell them, hey, you should pay me. But I now at this point work with so many different clients who have so many different payment terms that didn't end up being very accurate for me to show when I would actually receive the money. So like, for example, I have clients who pay me in net 15, meaning in 15 days from when I send the invoice, they're going to pay me. I have some other clients who pay me in net 45. These are some of my really big clients, which is just hard as a small business. But I created a spreadsheet that now factors in the date I invoice them plus whatever dates until they pay me. And then I can track by month, not what I'm invoicing out, but what I have coming in. And that has just gotten a little bit easier for me to see when my slow months are, because they're not accurate to how I'm actually working. Like my slow months of working, I could actually be receiving invoices that were net 45 from work I already did. Or I could have really busy months where I'm working a lot, but I'm not seeing that money yet because they're not paying me for a bit. That's just been something, if you are someone who is managing your own cash flow, that has been a game changer for me.
I think that's great. Yeah, I kind of seen like your policy or your system kind of shift over time with that, because you've mentioned a little bit on how you do that before, and so I think that's a really helpful lesson learned. So thanks for sharing. My next one is, this is maybe more personal, but I think it absolutely ties in with just career and business, is to be in nature more. Because I've learned that like I really love to be in it, and then like, this is gonna sound a little hokey, so bear with me, but like actually like look at it. So I'll go on a walk and I notice I'm like looking at the ground or I'm just thinking. But if you actually like look at the trees or like look up at the sky and just like take a second to look at the nature, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually really calming. And so if that might resonate with you, I used to not be a nature person, so I'm really surprised that I'm saying this, but it's really helped calm me and I think ground me throughout the year.
I love that, Mary. Yeah, I could echo that one. My word was savor for last year, and I did find myself purposely savoring the fall. And I actually have photos now on my phone of like pretty trees because I
Yeah.
was like, I'm gonna savor the season, and the colors are pretty, and
Oh, I love
I
that.
like literally stopped on a walk around Green Lake in Seattle, and I was like talking with a friend. I was like, sorry, I need to take a picture. It's a beautiful red tree.
I saw like this thing that's going around that when you go on a walk, pick a color and try to look for that color. So you might pick yellow and just see if you see anything that happens to be yellow, even if it's like, dreary winter in Washington. And so you're kind of like looking for something on your way. And I thought that would be fun. I haven't tried that yet.
That is a cool, yeah, look at that. That's like a bonus tip on top of a lesson
Yeah.
learned. There you go. My next one, I was really in my financial feels, I feel like, towards the end of this year, because it's another financial one. And this is something that I shared about at the conference as well. But I have learned that if I have three big, several $1,000 events a year, that forms a great foundation for me to then be a little bit choosier about what other work I take on top of that. And so for my business, I have like put a number to that of what my foundational events are. I want three of them. For you in your business, I think 5 years ago, Logan would have been like, wow, that number is way too big. I probably would have done a fourth of that. But whatever that looks like to you, if it's three big $2,000 clients, $5,000 clients, $20,000 clients, maybe you're a $100,000 client person. But having three of them, I found, just gives me a financial foundation that then I can be a little bit pickier of what other events I say yes to. And the idea with them being foundational is it's easier for me to get one big client than it is to go after 10 smaller clients to add up to that amount. And that is just something that has helped me with my outreach. And I was just proud in 2024, I actually hit that goal of 3 big events. And hot take here on the podcast, I'm excited to say that right now it looks like all 3 are going to repeat with me in 2025. So that is, yeah, we're in January, Mary, and I already know I've hit my 3 foundations. So
That's
that's
awesome.
pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. Now I will also say, just to caveat listeners, like with big money comes big responsibility and a lot of work. So it's not just me making that much money for, the exact amount of work my smaller events are for, but it has made me feel like I'm a little more comfortable breaking up with some of the hustle culture of needing to say yes just because I'm available.
I think that's awesome. If you don't mind me asking a question about your lesson learned. So I think it's a really interesting goal. I've heard some other event pros that they structure their business model like this, but how, like, you kind of have to work up to that though, don't you? Because in my mind, I'm always like, we do some smaller events, right? And I'm like, well, but how do you get the big ones? Like, yes, that sounds amazing, but do you have to work up to it?
I think so. I mean, for me, I think I got my first one before I was probably ready for it. Like someone just trusted me to take on this bigger scope. And it was like a 300-hour client. And that was it was a lot of work. And it was one though that I realized is once I've done it once, if I get to repeat that event with them again, and we've talked about this, like the payment should be the same, but I can save some time because I've done it before and I know the people I'm working with. But then once you get one, I think figuring out, like for me, it was like in the spring and I went, wow, I could probably deal with a second one in the fall. So that was now like once I had one, now I'm like, okay, I could take it on and I only want one because if you need 300 hours for your event, I can't take on that many at the same time without going insane. And then the third one I've expanded into now in the summertime is what I aim for. So um, good question, Mary. But yeah, I think but you can even start small. It could even have been, hey, I want, one $2,000. I want 3 $2,000 clients. If you're someone that most of your clients are maybe in the $1,000 range, it's different for everybody. But I think I was just learning that I could invest the same amount of time, but make more money off of some of these bigger events. But also I did need to cap it. I guess that's more where I'm saying is like, I'm not like, I can infinitely take on this many big events. I wanted 3 felt good. And I would just, once I have my 3, now I'm saying yes to the smaller stuff.
Right.
But yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, it comes with another level of responsibility. So yeah, that's helpful. Cool. Well, great lesson learned. I'm learning from you already. My next lesson learned for 2024 is to have deep connections and conversations with others. And this is, again, more of a personal one, but I think it directly impacts how I do business and how I run my days. So this came up somehow like mid-year. I think I was feeling like I was lacking, I don't know, like deep connection with people. And someone told me, like, you need to, like, that's something that like we all really need, is someone that you can talk to be able to, like, really, I don't know, just share and get things off. Because I think it started to impact like how I was just functioning as a human. That includes work, right? And so finding those people in your life that you can have deep connections with them, who just kind of understand and get you, I think helps us just get through all of it. And so that was a lesson learned that I actually needed that this year. And I don't know why, like, I've had, family or friends in my life before that I've been able to talk to, but for some reason this year I was like, no, I need to like offload on a couple people. And that was really nice. So that was a lesson learned for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier said than done, right? To lean into
Yeah.
those connections. I mean, I'm right there with you. I felt very grateful in 2024 that I had a solid support system of folks and people that I needed to just ask for help and they would be there. So hopefully, listeners, you had some people you could connect with last year. And if not, looking ahead for 2025, maybe think about who you could deepen a connection with. My next one, and I promise this is my last financial one, is to factor in my job supplies to my event estimates. And I say that really broadly, like supplies doesn't necessarily mean like paper and pens, but just like the software I'm using. Some, yes, is physical goods or Ubers or based on where the event location is, all that kind of stuff. I had in my like reflection at the end of the year, my retreat I learned that I had a little bit higher overhead than I feel like makes sense for what I do. When I just like look at the total number at the end of the year of like, wow, I spent several thousands of dollars on job supplies. And then I really reflected back on how that ties to my values is I don't want to be that person that nickel and dimes my client and says, no, I'm not going to buy you. Like, you owe me $5.55 for the coffee I bought you. Like, no, I'm just going to buy the client the coffee. Like, if it's been a busy day, like that just makes me feel good. Or if it's been a really long event, I'm going to take an Uber home. I'm not going to save money and take the bus because I don't have a car. Like, there's just like little things that all of that stuff adds up. And so my lesson learned for myself for the new year is I'm going to be adding a couple extra $100 into my project management fee that I use for a majority of my clients, so that I'm factoring in some of those hidden costs during my event and giving myself just some buffer so I can continue to. I mean, we talk about Mary the book club we did on reasonable hospitality, and I think I was like, how can I do that in my business? So it's kind of like not a hospitality fund, but just a job supplies. Literally, listeners, it's going to be like $200 that I add on to things that I then don't personally think about as income for me. I think about as just paying myself back for just the random little odds and ends and things that I do for events.
Yeah, I love that. I started doing that, I think last year as well. Like a few $100s. And I will say, like, sometimes when we're negotiating like with a potential client, that might be the first section to also go if I need to get rid of something. But it is a really, really nice buffer for things like supplies or just whatever. Like, it seems like other things come up as well. I think sometimes I'll use it for, considering like parking, and stuff like that for events. So
Yeah.
definitely, I love that.
Yeah, just the random things. And if you're like Mary and you actually call it out, like you can, some of my clients, I just kind of factor it into the total
Yeah.
that I give them. And it's more, I think it's, if anything, it's not like I'm charging them more. It's more, I personally am factoring that into like how much I see I make on a project is I just need to allocate more of that money going towards that random stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that one. My next lesson learned from 2024. This is oh my gosh, I can't remember. Was this the quote from Stephen R. Covey? Maybe, but I read it I think it's been in 3 books that I've read lately. So it's a good quote. And it's to never give up, never give up, never give up. And maybe that's not actually from Stephen Covey. I don't know. But it just seems like the stupidest and like simplest thing, right? But it's been something that's been like a really good reminder for me. I think there was a book that I was reading that said it's the best trait in business is to never give up. Now that's within reason, of course, right? Sometimes you have to know when to cut your losses, but I liked this. This was a phrase that was helpful for me this year. So what I say, it's a lesson learned. Maybe it's more of like a motivational phrase, but it did help me. So I'm going to count that as a lesson learned is to never give up.
Fun fact, Mary, I Googled it like you like to Google things sometimes. And you could have a new anthem of the year is Never Give Up by Sia.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
hey. Okay. Love
There you
that.
go. New track to add to your list. My next lesson learned from 2024 is an event related one, and it's that there are no dumb questions. If you're not sure, ask, and then make sure you document the answers somewhere so you can reference them in the future, because we have so many events and details running around in our head. Make sure you give a gift to future you by writing it down somewhere, and then I suggest you type it somewhere so it's searchable and easy to find. This lesson came, I think I talked about it on the podcast, but just the note, I had to request little platforms for camera operators for an event, and I didn't ask for stairs. I just assumed when you ask for a platform, it's going to come with stairs because it's a platform. Guys, how are they going to get up there? And it was something that didn't derail the event, but was definitely like a little fire I had to put out. And then when I was anecdotally talking with the camera operators later, they go, oh no, this happens all the time. We often don't get stairs. I was like, what do you mean? And like, yeah, people just, they don't ask for them. So, we don't get them. So that is one for you listeners. Whatever is your anecdote is whatever you ask for, make sure you ask the next question, which is, does it come with stairs? And if not, how do we get stairs? So no dumb questions in events.
I have definitely seen camera operators with no stairs. So I wonder how common it is for them to have stairs. But you're right. It's like, hello. And also, I know like that is definitely standard for a stage to have stairs, right? But there have been so many times when I've gotten on site and event, we're like, hey, where are the stage stairs? And it always gets forgotten. It's just crazy.
They're just like, you
So
never asked for stairs. And you're like, again, how are people getting on and off this?
kind of important, right?
Yes.
That's a good lesson learned. My next one is that when you exhibit, if you have the opportunity as a business owner, or maybe you work for a company and you do trade shows or something like that, like when you exhibit or trade show, make sure that you take the time to actually follow up with the contacts that you make. And I think we as event professionals, these are some of the best practices that we try to tell exhibitors, right? Like, there's only so much that we can do for you. You have to follow up with your contacts and all of that good stuff, because people will say, they didn't see the ROI from exhibiting at your event or something like that, perhaps. And a lot of times it's because they didn't put in the work, right? It's kind of on them. And so I had the opportunity to exhibit at like a local chamber event this year, and I took way too long to follow up with the contacts. In fact, there are still some that I need to follow up with, and it's been 6 months, which is ridiculous. So at that point, I'm like, well, I think I've shared this before on the podcast too. And we were saying, well, it'll just be a fun, like, hey, we met 6 months ago, but just checking in to say hi. Um, so yeah, that was a moment of I'm like practicing what I preach, because I finally realized like, oh, this is why exhibitors aren't successful, because they might not actually do the work after. So that was a lesson learned for me this year.
That's a good one. I think I stand by the fact that you can have there's a podcast I listened to that did an email forgiveness day, so that it was one day a year that you could send whatever delinquent emails or notes that I feel like you could definitely pop in there. My next one's event related as well. Tech checks are never a bad idea. And this is something that I just constantly, we've talked about on the podcast, but it just reminded me again this year. I had a client that had been a little resistant to it. We were able to put it on the calendar. I came in a day early for this event. We did tech checks. And I'm always a proponent. The more time you give yourself, the better. So whether that's the day before, like I did for this client, or even the night before, versus the 1 hour before showtime. And your tech check can apply to your AV team, because again, if you do it the day before, you're giving them time to say, oh, this wasn't working. Can you go get me a new cable? Because not every AV company has extra cables with them there on site. Even the in-house ones who tell you they're in-house, they don't always have that equipment. It still maybe is at another venue. And if you have that realization the day before, the night before, you're giving them time to troubleshoot. Versus if it's an hour before your show, they're probably not going to be able to have time to run across town and grab whatever it is they need to. And then from a content perspective, tech checks with your speakers. We've talked about why speakers hate the R word of rehearsal, but they are usually more open to a tech check. And this was particularly helpful for this client because every speaker had their own slide deck and their own, if they had videos or any of that, it was all like everyone's section was separate. And in years past, this had been a very kind of stressful event because every speaker was different. So we were constantly being told, here, I have updated slides. Oh yeah, I never told you that I needed audio playing out of this laptop, all of that stuff. And we did tech checks with all of the speakers except I think 2 of them. And I went from having probably like 70% of the event was little fires everywhere and 30% ran smooth. I went to like 90% of it was smooth and only about 10%. And one was someone who didn't come to their tech check. And the other one was someone who did. And they forgot to tell us that there should have been an embedded video in a file they gave us that was a still image instead of a video. But they were able to laugh it off. And later they were like, yeah, I forgot as well. Like I should have told you that. So tech checks are never a bad idea.
It's such a simple thing. I feel like we'll say it year after year, but seriously, still a lesson learned for other people too. I mean, I know that you're a proponent of them for sure, but absolutely. My next lesson learned is, man, I think some of these probably paint a picture of some of the thoughts in my brain from 2024, because this one is also not extremely concrete, but it was the mindset work that was really working for me. So this next one is something that Logan and I were just talking about actually before the podcast, is that we get to choose what we do every morning. And when I say we, I feel that way, especially for those who are entrepreneurs. Like we got ourselves into this mess, right? And so we get to choose what we do every morning. And that phrase is something that I would often actually verbalize and say to myself when I was feeling less motivated to get to work that day. And so that is something that actually really helped me in the mornings. And so that was another quick little motivational lesson learned for myself.
Yeah, we get to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Get
when
to do it.
days are crazy.
Yeah.
This is my final lesson learned, Mary. I will say, listeners, there's probably way more lessons that I just can't remember, because we know the longer we look back, the more rose-colored glasses we are of everything was great. And that ties into my last lesson learned, which is take the time to document what you did and what you'd change within 5 days of the event ending. 5 days. And I say this to you listeners because I've said I love a post-event report. You know I do. I do them all the time. And yet I'm sitting here today with an event that ended 2 months ago. And I have a very lovely client that they're not asking for it, but I know I promised them that I would send them a post-event report. I have the run of shows and all my handwritten notes on my desk. And I just haven't done it because I pushed it off a week, I pushed it off another week, and now all of a sudden it's 2 months later. And I'm going to be heavily relying on my notes that I wrote in handwritten to type up into this report because I've waited so long. So even if it's like 30 minutes, just sitting down and documenting what went well. My post-event report, I have some events, it's like 10 to 15 pages. Other events that I've done a bunch of times now for the same client, it's just bullet points on a simple Word doc, not even in my fancy report format. Like, that's okay, but you need to document it. And then I'll reiterate, I think I've shared this as a bonus tip, but schedule your post-event debrief before you even have the event, because everybody's rushing up to the event itself. And the minute the event's over, you're going to have some clients, some vendors, some key folks go offline and they're just tired. And it's going to be really hard to find a time when all of you are available. So that's on my like personal checklist for any event is, a week or two before, I ask them, hey, when do we want to meet up after the event, and get it on the calendar? Because if that's not, the 5 days can't help you, that's what I'm telling myself is 5 days, then at least that debrief in person can give you a different deadline, but hopefully still close to make sure you actually do it.
I love it. And it's so true. Absolutely. We actually had a couple events where we never got a debrief. We asked for it maybe a little bit too late or whatever, and we didn't get it. So I love that. Absolutely good best practice. My also last lesson learned, so we timed this out well, Logan, is, and I've told my team this if they're listening to this already, but don't give such a long Christmas break. So that was the end of year lesson learned for me. And the thing is with the event schedules, ours, and I'm sure many of yours, is so unpredictable. And so at the time I was like, wow, it would be great to give this extended break. I think we all probably want this. I want it. This is my favorite time of year. But then we had a couple events that did pop up. And so I had to eat into that Christmas break a little bit that I originally gave, which I didn't feel great about doing that to certain members of the team. And so just picking a more reasonable date to kind of start that holiday break near the end of the year. And so unfortunately, we won't be able to do as long of a one come 2025. It'll still be nice and lengthy, but not as long as we aim to do. So that was another lesson learned for me.
Yeah, I feel like listeners, you might be feeling that either, crush back to reality on Monday of this week, or for some of us, I have an event that I'm actually actively doing this week. So I did not really take as much of a break, but all exciting things. But I hear you, Mary. It's good to know when to take breaks, but I think it's also, like you're saying, you're calibrating. Like, you've taken not enough breaks in the past. Now you've taken maybe too long of one, and you're figuring it out.
Yeah, we'll get it.
Well, listeners, we hope you had time to also maybe jot down some lessons learned you learned from us, but maybe you also thought about what you would have added if we'd had you here on the podcast of your lessons learned. As you can tell, all of ours are from a personal place, and yet I feel like can apply to anything that you're doing. So thanks for sticking with us. And Mary, you have our bonus tip, our first bonus tip of season 5.
No pressure. Yes, I do. So I texted Logan about this, but I am reading a book right now that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I might talk about it in a few coming episodes as well. But this bonus tip is from that. And so this is something called the buyback loop, where you audit, transfer, and fill your time. And so bear with me. It's just like a 1-minute bonus tip that hopefully will get you enticed to go read the book. But the book is called Buy Back Your Time from Dan Martell. And what he's explaining is how you can get more time back, right? And so you're going to audit your time to determine like what tasks are sucking out your energy. And then you're going to transfer those tasks to somebody who's better at it and enjoys it. And then you're going to fill back your time with higher value tasks that light you up and help you make money. And so that is my bonus tip for today, is to take a moment to audit, transfer, fill. So try that buyback loop, and maybe you can offload something and buy back your time.
That was amazing, Mary. Look at that. We're going to transfer some things out. Look at that. All right. Well, listeners, thank you so much for sticking with us. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. As always, you can connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. Just let us know that you heard about us from the podcast. We love hearing from you. And if you want more Better Events content, a bonus episode every single month, join our private community on Substack. And as always, we want to thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.